What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's the Real G. Of course, my name is Gregory. I appreciate everybody for joining in. Guys, on this video here, I'm going to go ahead and give my review for the season finale, episode 6 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Or should I say Night of the Nine Kingdoms? There will be spoilers in this review, so I do advise anybody who hasn't seen the episode, please go ahead and click back later after you, of course, watch the episode. But if you just want to straight up be spoiled, hey, who gives a shit? Come on and join in. So, in this episode, guys, before I dive into it, for anybody who's seen my review for last week, this was true. Last week's episode was truly one of the best episodes on television that we have gotten in a very long time. Hell, honestly, some might even say it could have been one of the best ever. That episode, from start to finish, only being around 37 minutes long, it kept you glued to the screen, and it was just a fantastic episode from start to finish. So, with this episode coming out, especially after the way last week's has ended, I honestly didn't really have too high of an expectation for this episode, just because of how great last week's was. I felt that it was going to go follow the trend of Game of Thrones, where that episode right before last is where the real big climactic stuff happens, and it's usually followed up for an aftermath episode, right, where this is where everybody's at, this is where we go into next season. So I thought this episode did a really good job, of course, following that same pattern there, and just kind of touching up characters, where they are, where they at, and where they're going. And for anybody who is familiar with the Dunk and Egg story, you kind of have an idea of where it's going into the second book. But just to go ahead, and like I said, I'm going to put spoilers up here because I am going to dive into the show and just kind of give my opinions about some of the best moments of this episode, and just kind of theorize where these characters may be going. Now, just to go ahead and with the start of this episode, Dunk's in a pretty bad spot, man. He's laying up under a tree. He's badly hurt, badly wounded, and he's of course visited by his good old friend Lionel Baratheon. Now, Lionel Baratheon definitely brought this comedic and high energy to the show. I thought was what's needed, and he was hilarious anytime he was on the screen. But you also like him too, he's a straight up G, man. And he of course is visiting his buddy, and he brings a maester here to help him out, tend to his wounds, and it's and this, honestly, this part right here was just a hilarious encounter, where the maester's looking over Sir Dunk, and he's like, oh, these wounds are beyond, my abilities. And Lionel replies, he goes, an itching asshole is beyond your abilities. Just hilarious, man. And he, like I said, anytime he was on the screen, you're going to get a good laugh, right? Well, he, of course, is trying to bring Dunk back into good spirits, because Dunk's like, hey, why do I live but a prince dies? So he's dealing with that. What's his purpose? Where does he go from here? And Lionel gives him with a nice proposition. He says, hey, why don't you come with me? He said we could do some damage together. And that's definitely a hint to, of course, their relationship in the future, which, we'll talk about another time. But that was it was a really cool encounter. And so Dunk, he's trying to figure out, where does he go next, right? So he got his offer from Lionel. And so he decides, he's like, he's going to go into town. And so while he's in town, it was kind of awkward for him because a lot of people were looking at him, very hastily. A lot of people can say they're blaming him for the prince's death, right? It's his fault. If things didn't happen the way it was, maybe Prince Baelor wouldn't have died. So Dunk's dealing with that. So it's kind of like a walk of shame in a way. Everybody's looking at him and this and that. Well, he, of course, meets his good old buddy Raymond. Now, I want to go ahead and give a little shout out to Mr. Raymond Fossaway. Raymond Fossaway, that man teed up when he needed to, right? This guy was being bullied by his cousin, being his little bitch, and then all of a sudden he turns into a little badass himself. He's like knight me. He gets knighted, and you see him just wrecking people, man. You look at him, he survived. So it's pretty good stuff. Shout out to my boy Raymond Fossaway. But the counter when he first sees Dunk, man, Dunk's his buddy, man. They give a nice hug to each other. Maybe a hug that pondered a little too longer, and Dunk was just kind of like, yeah, that's good, buddy. That's good. It's good. But then, of course, it's followed. You kind of see where Raymond is currently at in this situation. He after his victory and his win, he's knighted now, and but of course, it led to bad turmoil with his family, and then it shows him being married. Who's he married to? One of the whores. So, but good to see my boy Raymond is happy, and well, Dunk gets a request. He gets requested to give an audience to, of course, Maker. Now, Maker is not Prince in line to be king yet. However, I believe he's like second or third in line at the moment. Well, he, of course, requests Dunk's presence. Well, Dunk shows up, and I thought that this particular moment of this episode was honestly, it was just a really strong moment, and they did a really good job, kind of doing the books justice around this part here, where he's like, both men are just in real deep stages of grief, Of course, one lost his brother, another lost a man who, one is heir to the Iron Throne, but it's a man who gave up his life to fight for him, So, both are feeling guilty, about the death of Prince Baylor. And I thought it was a really strong encounter between these two here, where Prince Maker, he's just like, people will say throughout history how my mace was the one that struck my brother and killed him, Well, Dunk's just like, well, people are going to say, if he never fought for me, he wouldn't have died. And so both men are just in real deep stages of grief. But Maker gives him a proposition. Now, this proposition that Dunk gets proposed with is pretty much taking care of Egg, and I thought it was a really, like I said, a real strong moment between these two characters, and and he said, I'm sending my one son. He's going to go live off in free cities, maybe get the wildness out of him, talking about Aaron. And, of course, Darren, he's a lost cause. Darren is just a drunk. And so he's just like, hey, I want to send, Doug, Egg needs to be a squire. And he's just like, he won't have anybody but you. And I thought that was a really strong moment. And, and you can tell that really hit Dunk hard. But Dunk also, at the same time, he's just like, man, I'm done with princes, man. Like, I'm just straight up done with them, man. After everything that's happened at this tournament, I don't want to see you guys ever again. That's kind of what he's thinking. So, but unfortunate for him, Egg happens to hear him saying, him pretty much turning the offer down, and him and Egg have a really nice moment there, and Egg was pretty much like, you're not the knight I thought you were. And that pretty much leaves, Dunk kind of on his own little journey. Like I said, he's dealing with a lot, man. There's a lot to process, and so he goes back into town, and he has a moment where he's at a bar and he's hanging out with his buddy Raymond. Well, guess who he happens to run into? Darren Targaryen, who is kind of the whole reason all of this has happened, right? Darren is the one, not only, he said that Dunk pretty much stole Egg, on top of him striking the other prince. So Dunk got it all laid on him, man, and from these damn Targaryens, just because they don't have no accountability. And so, kind of put my man in a tough situation. So he's pissed off. He's like, what the hell are you doing here? You got some balls on you, bro. And it leads to him. And I thought this was a really, really great moment where it shows him, he's sitting there and he's having a moment, kind of like a flashback moment with him. And of course, Sarlin of Penetry, the knight who he served for all these years. And it also had a little bit of comedy to it as well. And, you hear Sir Arlen Pennytree telling him a story, and he's just like that. So, Dunk starts getting sad, thinking he died. He asks him, he's like, why you never knighted me? Why you never knighted me? And Sir Arlen Pennytree wakes up and he's just like, a knight never finishes a good story. A knight always finishes a good story. And it just, it was so humorous, but it also was such a nice message to Dunk, like, hey, your story's not done yet, dude. You got to finish your story. And so Dunk, from there, it really spawned on him, man. And he starts making him think like, man, look at these Targaryens, look where they're heading. I don't want Egg to end up like that. So of course, it seems like he made his mind up, but at the same time, there's also a nice moment too. Egg sees his brother who's in true pain, but Egg almost has like this very horrific look on his face where he looks like he wants to almost hurt his brother. And as he gets closer and closer, where you're just like, man, what are you doing, man? What are you about to do? And then you happen to see his father standing in a corner, and his father gets up, doesn't say a word, and just puts his hand on his son. And in that moment, Maker himself, he knows what his family, and just kind of where they are and what they've been and what they've done. And well, follows up with Dunk. He comes in, he barges in to go see, of course, Maker, and he tells him, I'll have him under these conditions. Pretty much saying, I'm going to teach him. I'll have him be my squire, but I'm not going to be bound to any king. I'm not going to be bound to any prince. I'm going to be a hedge knight, just like I grew up. And I thought that was just a true phenomenal ending, because you know what? This is the Dunk story, man. He's a wanderer, man. He's a nomad. He's a Ronin. He's a nomad. And he's going to take Dunk along the road with him. So it's just really fun stuff. And then it shows him and Egg, they're going together, and they're on, and this is a really kooky thing too, where he's like, in the seven, he goes, we can go anywhere in the seven kingdoms. Well, Egg looks at him, he goes, you mean nine kingdoms? He's like, no, there's seven kingdoms, Egg. Egg's like, well, there's blank, 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 blank. And he's just like, it's just the camaraderie between these two was great, and the actors that play these characters, they've done a great job with them and their portrayal, and it's just gets you more excited for what's going to happen in season two. Season two, and the great thing about season two, it's coming next year, so we're not going to have to wait 4 to 5 years like all these other streamers, where we're going to have to wait for until I'm a damn old man for the next season. But no, this show is going to be released annually, and not annually, but I can't wait, man. I cannot wait for season two. This season was just phenomenal from start to finish. I honestly personally give it a 9 out of 10. And it gives you everything that you want from Game of Thrones. It really does. And here's my take on it, man. I like House of Dragons. I really like House of Dragons. I thought they did a great job, following up after Game of Thrones and its success. But my opinion, House of Dragons is crafted very much like season 6, 7, and 8 from Game of Thrones. And say what you will, but those were the weakest seasons in the show. However, despite it being some of the weakest in the show, it did have some of the best moments, which is kind of like this. It's like a weird correlation between the two, right? Because we have some of the best fight scenes, action, the dragons, but however, the plot seemed to thin out some, And House of Dragons does a great job, with kind of following some of those great moments in that recipe alone. But the one thing about Night of the Seven Kingdoms, it just does it better, just on a whole scale of what we loved most about Game of Thrones. Which, to be honest, guys, what we love most is the little things. It's just following these characters, a little day by days, and that's what made the show so great. And then, of course, yeah, we had the whole spectacle towards the end of the show, but really, honestly, season 1 through 5. And the dialogue, the story, the everything all of that is what we loved, right? Plus, we got the action on top of it. And so Night of the Seven Kingdoms followed that recipe. So you got to give kudos to Ira Parker and, of course, George R.R. Martin for making this show, resemble Game of Thrones the best, and we're all blessed for it, man. I know I am. So let me know what you guys thought of the episode down below. Was it a fitting season? Was it a fit season ending to the show? What were some of your things that you didn't like about the show? I personally loved the show from start to finish. I would say the only thing I truly didn't like was the run times and the lack of episodes. But from what we got from it, I thought it was pretty spectacular. But let me hear your guys' thoughts down below. And of course, if you got a chance to subscribe to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to the Real G, man, because I know you're a real G like me. And of course, if you haven't got a chance to like the video, go ahead and like the video as well. But guys, until next time, go ahead and watch something.